Hi everyone, my name is Leah Kopke and I'm a 3D motion design freelancer. I also have a podcast where each week I cover another 3D modeling tool for Cinema 4D. Hi everyone, welcome. I'm excited to go over another 3D modeling tool today. Today we're going to go over plane cut. We've gone over several cut tools in the past. We've gone over edge cut, we've gone over loop path cut, we've gone over connect points edges, and we've gone over line cut. So I'm excited to go over this new one with you today. Let's jump into Cinema 4D and show how it works. Here we are inside of Cinema 4D. The very first thing that I will do is drop something in our scene for us to cut. Now, similar to the last time when we went over the line cut tool, we used a fruit to actually cut. So under the window drop menu, I'll go into our asset browser and I'll search for fruit. So we'll play some Fruit Ninja and we're going to cut this orange here. So I'll click on the orange and that'll load up. And I'll come out of the asset browser here. I'll open this up, drag out the orange from the subdivision surface, and I will delete the subdivision surface because I don't need it. I'll zoom in here so that I can see the orange. And I'll turn on our display garage shading lines so that we can see the edges of our orange. Now, if we go into our mesh menu under the cut menu, you can see our plane cut is right here. And right now it is grayed out. So this actually works in polygon mode, edge mode, and point mode. So for right now, I'll keep this on polygon mode so that now when we go back to our mesh tools and hover over cut, you can see plane cut is now lighting up. It's no longer grayed out because we can use it. And the hotkeys for it are KJ or MJ. I think MJ is easier to remember because M is like modeling tools and MJ sounds like Michael Jordan. So we're going to click on plane cut right over here. But you could also use the hotkey MJ if you prefer. Now we have different options here. Our first mode is cut all. So I'll drag and click my mouse over here and I'll hit escape. And in the cut all mode, we've cut this all the way around. And in doing so, it's still all one mesh. We've only cut an edge. We haven't separated these two parts because we aren't in split mode. We aren't in remove part A or remove part B mode. We're in cut all mode. So if I use the hotkey we've gone over before for fill selection, UF, and I click on this, it's selecting the whole orange because that orange is all one part. Now I'm going to hit undo. Remove that there. And I'm going to click MJ again for plane cut. And we're going to change our setting to split. Now split, if I click and drag my mouse like that, hit escape, it looks about the same as before, but if I use UF, you can see that I can select this part with fill selection because it is a separate part. And if I hit E, I can even move this up here. You can see these are two separate parts right here. I'm going to hit undo. Undo on PC is Control Z. On Mac, it is Command Z. And now that we've done that, we have some more settings to go over. So we have remove part A. I am clicking from the left side of my screen to the right side. And we have removed part A. Now, if I try to remove part B instead, and I click from the left side of my screen to the right side of my screen, we've removed the opposite side, which is part B. Now, what is part A and what is part B is dependent on the direction you are clicking. And that's why I said we're clicking from our left side of the screen to our right side of the screen. Now, let's say What if we instead go from the right to the left? The opposite side is removed. So now you know that that is where part A and part B are coming from. They're determined by which side you're clicking and first and second, and that helps determine it. So I'm going to hit undo now. We've been working in the plane mode free. There's other options here as well, but there's a lot of settings for the free mode that we actually haven't covered yet. So let's talk about those. If I click and drag my mouse, you can see our plane position and plane rotation are updating as I'm clicking and dragging before I let go. This is one way to determine our plane position and plane rotation, but you can also just manually enter these in here. You can click on these points here and move them up and down. And that's how they work. Now, if you click while holding Shift, you'll notice we're snapping to 45 degrees. Well, where is that 45-degree angle even coming from? It is coming from here where it says angle 45 degrees. We can also change this to 10 degrees. And if we hold Shift, I'm just going to redo that real quick. I'll make a new cut so I can more easily grab this point here. If I hold down Shift, you'll see now we're snapping to 10 degrees as we do this again. If I hold down Angle Constrain, it will do that without me holding down Shift. It'll just automatically do that. It's constrained to snapping by the angle. I'll deselect Angle Constraint so that we continue working. If I click on the center of this, you'll see it's moving around. And you'll see as I'm moving this around, it's actually snapping to points and edges and polygons. Now, why is it doing that? Because we have Auto Snap on. Auto Snap will allow this to automatically snap to points. So if I want this to snap exactly to this point right here, that you can see is highlighted as I hover over it and let go, we're going to cut exactly there. There's also a whole other gizmo for this, and you don't usually see it come up until you look at this from other views or you adjust one of these plane or rotation settings manually. So if I click the middle mouse button to go into the other 4 views, you'll see we actually have this gizmo now showing up in all the 4 views. Now, if we click on the center of it, you can just freely move this around. If you click on one of these points here, like this one right here, you are just freely rotating it around. If you click on one of these circular things here, that's actually just rotating it around that axis. And the axis color is dependent on what axis it is. So green is going to be your y-axis, red is your x-axis, blue is your z-axis. You also have these arrows. The green arrow will move this in the y-axis because it is green. You have all of these options here. You can move this freely. Thus, this plane mode is called free. Now there's one more setting here. I'm going to go back into this view here again by hitting the middle mouse button. And I'm just going to hit escape and undo this cut entirely, and then I'll go back into the MJ button so that we have plane cut activated. I'm going to select cut all. We're still in the free mode. I'd just like to show you something real quick. If I hold down Control and click and drag and I just keep moving this, you'll notice I'm just making a bunch of cuts everywhere I let this go, parallel cuts. So that's one way you can make a bunch of parallel cuts if you'd like to. But there's more ways to do it than that, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. I'm just going to undo that. Something you may notice is that while we're making all of these cuts and making all these adjustments to these settings, is that they are updating in real time. There's this option down here called real-time cut. It is turned on. Most of the time you're going to want this turned on. If you're making so many cuts that it is slowing down your computer, every little setting you update, if you're making so many cuts at once that it is slowing down your computer, you can turn this off so that your computer isn't readjusting every time in the viewport, slowing things down as you work. But I don't know why you would be needing to make that many cuts to a model, and that sounds like a very rare occasion. But now you know that's an option down there if you ever find yourself doing that. Now we have more options here. So we went over free. We also have local, world, and camera coordinates that we can use. But just first of all, so that our world coordinates aren't the same as our local coordinates, I'm going to use the E hotkey to move this in model mode. And then I'll use R in order to rotate it. So now our axis is no longer lining up with the world axis over here that you can see, or that you can see in the origin. Now, if I were to click on this again and click MJ and go back into polygon mode, if we use the local axis, and we have our plane set to XY, you'll see we can cut this along the XY plane that is relative to the axis of this orange, which is our local axis. And now if we change this to world axis, it will use the XY axis of the world axis to cut this orange. If we change this from world to camera, it will use the XY axis of the camera axis instead. So this cut is actually parallel to our camera view, which is interesting. And you'll see you can also use the YZ axis. You can use the XZ axis. So that's what your plane settings are here. And what these planes are relative to, you can select in the plane mode. I'm going to change this back to local. Now, something that you'll notice is that when I'm moving this back and forth, it's basically lining up with where my cursor is. Now, if I change the offset here, let's change it to 0.5 inches. You'll see that now, when I move my mouse back and forth, this cut is 0.5 inches offset from where my cursor is. So that's an option if you'd like to work like that. So maybe you could click on this polygon knowing that you want this cut to be 0.5 inches away from this polygon, and it will make that cut 0.5 inches away from here. Now, why would you want to do this? You might be wondering. Well, if you are doing some very technical modeling that needs to be very accurate in terms of distances, then this could come in handy if you know that you need to make a cut 0.5 inches away from something in particular. Then this could be a handy tool. So that's what the offset is. I'm going to change that back to 0. We're going to increase the number of cuts to 10. So now we're going to be making 10 cuts at once to this orange. And I need to click away in order to really see that happening. But you'll also see that we aren't seeing those cuts. And why are we not seeing all those cuts? It's because our spacing for these cuts is so big. So let's change this to be 0.2 inches. And now you can see all the cuts to this orange. There are so many. So you can make a lot of cuts at once. And that's what I was talking about with real time. If you're making thousands and thousands of cuts at once, it might slow down your computer, and it'll speed it up if you turn off this real-time cut, but then you won't see it updating in real time. I think you're going to need that turned on, though, because it's helpful. So now you can see that's how the number of cuts works. And it's really fun, actually. Just this tool. We have other options here. We can restrict the cuts to a selection. So I'm going to make a selection using UL, and we've covered UL in the past. If you're interested in that, I'll leave a link to the other tools and those tutorials in the description below. And I'll use UF again for fill selection, and I'll hold down Shift and I'll select this area here. And then I'll click MJ once again, and I'll say restrict the cut to the selection. And now you can see that our cuts are only showing up on this part here that's selected. We are restricting these cuts to the selection. Now let's say we want to try to see what select cuts do. So if we select this here and we cut this, now we have cuts here, but with select cuts turned on, if you go back into edge mode, you'll see that we have those cuts selected. So now you can use those for 3D modeling. Like you could use those to make those cuts into edges. So we've gone over this tool before, edge to spline. And now we have a group of splines that we could create because we had that selection there. So it's useful for 3D modeling if you want to select those cuts afterwards for whatever reason you might want to. You can save them as a selection or something like that. I'm going to hit undo because we don't actually need those as splines. But I just want to show you how that worked. And I'll use MJ again. We've gone over select cuts. We've gone over restrict to selection. Connect cut edges. This is an interesting one. So I'll go back into polygon mode. I don't really want those polygons selected anymore. So I'll deselect those and hit the hotkey again, MJ. I'll turn off restrict to selection because now we have no selections. I don't think we need to select our cuts, so I'll turn that off now. We've had this on by default, connect cut edges. Now, if I were to turn this off, we'll still be creating cuts, but they won't show up as easily on your screen, you'll notice. And that's because we are cutting the edges, but we aren't creating edges between those points which we just cut. So you could see we cut right there and made a point. We cut right there and made a point, and so on. This is following the shape of the cut we just made around the orange. But you don't see the actual edge there because we deselected that option that was allowing that edge to show up. So I'm going to hit undo because we don't need that to be showing up anymore since now we know what it does. So the hotkey MJ, like Michael Jordan, and we're back in here. We've gone over connect cut edges. I'm going to select that back on because I'd like that to be on. Preserve N-gon curvature. Now that's an interesting one. So let's go into here and create some N-gons. UL, I'm going to select some of these. I'll select this, 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 this. I'll just keep selecting while holding Shift. So now that we have these edges here selected, I'll use the hotkey UZ. And you can see that's for the melt option. And now we actually, what we've done is we've turned a lot of these into n-gons. You can see they have more than 4 edges, so they're n-gons. And let's turn some more of these into n-gons actually. So I'm going back into edge mode and I'll hit UL. And we're going to select these here. And we'll use UZ again to melt those. And now you can see this whole area here is one big n-gon, but you'll notice that this n-gon actually has some curvature to it. Now that's where this next setting comes into play. So I'll hit MJ again in order to open this up, and we have preserve n-gon curvature on. Here, so you can see right now if I don't have preserve n-gon curvature on, it's interpreting that area of the n-gon as being completely flat. You can see that in our slices here, in our slices previews, those look flat. And it'll cut them as flat unless if we select this button here to preserve the n-gon curvature. So I'll click there. So I'll click here and then I'll go over here again. I'll select that button as doing a little bit of a better job of preserving the curvature. It's added in some extra points in order to help preserve that curvature. You can especially see it up here. It might work better. Actually, this is a really good example of how it's preserving the curvature. So if I were to select right here, you can see it's trying to preserve that curvature of the orange. This is such a complicated n-gon where it's having a little bit of trouble. If I were to turn this off, it wouldn't be trying to preserve that curvature at all, as you can see here. So it does make a little bit of a difference. I think that if you really want smooth curvature, I'd avoid n-gons, because this is Cinema 4D trying its absolute best to work with the weird n-gon that I've created here. And it's doing a pretty good job of using its algorithm to preserve that n-gon curvature. But you can see at some point, if you have a really kind of crazy shaped n-gon, it does start to have some trouble and it does start getting a little bit straight there. But with a simpler n-gon like this one here, it can preserve that curvature a little bit better. So it depends on what you're doing. But that's what preserve n-gon curvature does, is it tries to preserve the curvature of your n-gons when you cut it. So now we are back to our original orange with all of its edges. We have this other option here called regular slice. Now you can see when I'm moving my mouse, the slices are following my mouse. But if I just turn on regular slice, it'll just slice them evenly across the orange instead. Like that. And that is actually the last of our options for this tool. We've covered all of the others, and this tool is really handy. I hope you find this helpful while you're 3D modeling. And if you want to check out any of the other tools I talked about briefly, this is actually our 55th episode, so we've gone over quite a few 3D modeling tools already. So if you're interested in learning about any of them, you can check out the previous episodes, or you can stay tuned for future ones, and you'll be notified of those if you hit like and subscribe. I appreciate it, and when you hit subscribe, you're supporting me making more of these tutorials, and I hope to see you next time on Ambient 3D Animations.